Capcom just dropped a bombshell of an announcement going over everything that is coming to the game in the next update, which will be dropping very shortly. And it's not just the usual small weapon adjustments that we tend to see in these updates, we're actually expanding upon the endgame with a whole new relic system that is going to add a lot more skills and customization to your builds, a new tier for endgame difficulty, and some big changes to some skills that a lot of us might have already been using that may potentially end up having a great effect on the game's meta. Not to mention that a whole 11 out of the 14 weapons are going to be changed in this update, so there really is a lot for us to go over in this update that almost feels like a free title update. With that being said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero and let's get started. So starting from the very beginning, as always the director Yuya Tokura-san thanks us for playing Monster Hunter Wilds. As was previously announced, we were going to be getting this new update before Title Update 3, and some of these features, specifically the new level of quest difficulty and the new reward system for the talismans, were initially planned to be released on Title Update 3, but they managed to push it a bit ahead on the schedule and release it earlier. So once we get to the end of September, we're going to be getting Title Update 3 along with at least an additional monster and the kind of changes that we have come to expect from title updates. And then in Title Update 4, we're going to be getting more challenging hunts, so that's what I'm guessing we're finally going to be getting Elder Dragons, but we'll have to wait and see for that. Now, expanded endgame content. This was the part that I was the most excited for, as a lot of us feel like the endgame of Monster Hunter Wilds hasn't been the best compared to some of the previous ones, even though you do have a decent amount of variety when it comes to the monsters you hunt because you have the 4 apexes along with Gormagala and Arkfeld, but because you get so many decorations and the relic grind for the Artian weapons is also quite easy to do, you just end up with not a lot of things for you to hunt or desire to go after. And also when it comes to difficulty, apart from the new monsters that were added with title updates, as well as Tempered Gormagala, pretty much everything else felt very easy. So it's nice to see that we're going to be getting a new tier of difficulty, which is going to be coming with the Tempered monsters of 9 star that will begin to appear in different locales. Now at the beginning, only some monsters will be available as a 9 star Tempered monster. I believe that it's going to be specifically these monsters in this picture, so the 4 different apexes, along with our DLC monsters, Mizutsune, Legaicrus, and Seregios, and of course Arkveld and Gormagala. And I do want to mention this image by Shinkai briefly, where he mentions the different HP pulls for monsters as a 5-star Tempered monster, and we can see Gormagala having 55,000 HP. So now that we're going to be getting 9-star Tempered monsters, is Gormagala gonna have 200,000 HP? Boy, I wonder how difficult these guys are gonna be. Now moving on from that, we're going to be getting these glowing stone appraisals that you get at the end of a quest. You can see it in this image right here. It's going to be these items whenever you go for a 9-star quest. And once you defeat them, you'll transform the appraised talismans that will come with randomly assigned skills. So here we have a screenshot and an example of what these talismans could roll with. And as you can also see on the left hand side, they come with different rarities and you're able to of course favorite them, so you're going to be able to more easily manage them. And on the right hand side you can see it's a rarity 7 charm with a level 1 decoration slot, handicraft level 3, counter strike level 1, and poison resistance level 1. So a good indication of some really good skills that you can have on here, but also it means that we can have weapon skills available in these talismans, as handicraft is currently only available as a weapon skill that you can get from a decoration. So the question then is, are we going to see these equipment skills be, for example, the unique skill that the Legaicrus weapons have? Because that would be really cool. Or is it just going to be the more generic skills that you can find on weapons, like again handicraft, counter-strike, burst, etc. Now of course when it comes to this kind of talisman grind, there is a lot of RNG associated with it, as I'm sure there's going to be some incredible charms that you're going to be able to chase after, and who knows, we're going to be able to hunt for hundreds of hours and not get the desired charm. Such is the way of the desire sensor. I think the community is very divided on this topic. A lot of people are against RNG talismans, a lot of people are in favor of it. Me personally, I am somewhere in the middle, where I do like having something to chase after, but if it's an incredible amount of RNG at some point, I start not really liking it too much. I think the perfect spot is somewhere along the lines of the Curio system that we had in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, where it felt like an addition on top of everything that you already had on your character. Think of it as a small extension of your build that doesn't define it, but allows you to specialize in certain things. I hope it goes more in that direction as opposed to you just being able to grind for a talisman that has like a 0.05% chance to drop, but gives you bursts, handicraft, and weakness exploit. So do let me know how you feel about this, but they do also mention something to address the RNG aspect of this. And like other talismans which can be crafted and upgraded at the smithy, Appraised talismans cannot be upgraded. However, they can be randomly granted not only armor skills but weapon skills and decoration slots, allowing for more customization and experimentation with builds. I find it funny that they actually addressed sets by builds. I think that is the first time they have officially done it. A bit of a tangent, but there is a lot of people in the community that get somewhat upset or at least get icky whenever they see people like me, for example, in my videos, calling them builds and not sets, because that's not what they initially were. So I find that they at least name it here as builds very funny. We hope this leads to more engaging gameplay and encourages hunters to try different weapons and armor based on the talismans they obtain. So that's something that, for example, with Call of Taroth back in World happened a lot, at least for me. You would end up getting a very cool weapon for a weapon type that you never really tried before, but because it's so good, you kind of want to go out of your way to actually give it a try. You may potentially get a cool weapon, so now in Wilds you may potentially get a cool charm that comes with skills that are very much specialized for, let's say, the hunting horn, so you decide to give the weapon a try. I very much like that aspect of encouraging people to try different weapons, to branch out more, as I think that's one of the things that can allow you to have even more fun with the game. It's just rediscovering the joy of the game with a whole different weapon. They also go on to say that additionally we recognize that the endgame content early after the game's release was slightly skewed around Arkveld. This combined with the fact that Arkveld is relatively resistant to elements resulted in limited opportunities to try out diverse builds. In response, we have adjusted the difficulty, average hunting time, and rewards for each of the 9-star monsters being added in an effort to ensure that all monsters offer balanced rewards fitting with the effort spent hunting them. I'm very curious about the adjustments to the average hunting time. Are we gonna have 30-minute hunts now? A lot of the hunts in Wilds were very quick, even against tempered monsters. I'm talking 5 minutes for me, which I would consider myself an average player. So if you get something closer to like 20 minutes, I would not be against that. We encourage you to select your hunts based on your own individual skill, equipment, or needs and enjoy each challenge. Now, as for the 9-star monster adjustments, in light of the addition of the 9-star monsters, we have lengthened the duration of meal effects so that they are less likely to expire if the hunts go on a little long. Okay, how long are these quests gonna take? Because the meal effect lasts for a whole hour, so I'm kind of scared of this now. I'm sure it's gonna be something reasonable, but I'm a bit apprehensive now. We also raised the upgrade limited for armor of rarity 5 or above, so that players can squeeze in a little more defense before they go up against these challenging new monsters. Additionally, from hunter rank a 100 and higher, Raidao and New Udra will now appear in the Wounded Hollow, and each region's apex predator will be more likely to appear within that region if it is not experiencing an inclemency. So I like this a lot. I like that Raidao and New Udra will appear in the Wounded Hollow. I hope that as we get more updates, we get to see more of them in the Wounded Hollow. In case you guys aren't aware, there is actually a mod that allows you to spawn any monster in the game into the Wounded Hollow, just so that you can fight them 1v1 in the arena without having to run around the map and have more of this classic Monster Hunter experience in the arena. And that can make for some very enjoyable hunts in the middle of exploring these vast open maps. So I hope they go the long way and start adding more and more monsters into these maps. I also like that they are raising the likelihood of an apex showing up without the region being in an inclemency, because more often than not that kind of makes the map look a little bit ugly. By now the different time periods and effects that a different map can have are no more than novelty that has kind of worn its welcome. It's not something that I absolutely love, and it can make some maps look a lot worse than they are supposed to look, especially if you watch them on YouTube with the compression and whatnot. So whenever possible, I go out of my way to hunt monsters whenever there is good weather and you're actually able to tell what is happening on screen. So now being able to hunt these apex monsters a lot more often in those situations is going to be quite nice. Now, as mentioned previously, Title Update 3, which again is coming out at the end of September, will see the gradual introduction of 9 9-star monsters in event quests as well. We are also adjusting the strength of support hunters in line with the addition of 9-star monsters, and they apologize that the timing of these adjustments are in stages, that they are not all at once, and ask for our understanding. They likely want to see how people fare against this new tier of difficulty, because it might end up being too much HP or too little HP for the monsters, maybe they do too much damage. They might be a bit concerned with how they are going about it, so they want to tame our expectations and give us sort of this greasing period where they are going to be able to gauge just how much they should change about each monster to make them as perfect as they can be for a 9-star monster in their vision. Now, in order to diversify the lineup of quests, we are making it possible to work for Lagiacrus to appear in the Wounded Hollow, as well as other additions such as more hunts targeting packs of monsters. Again, more quests in the Wounded Hollow, I like that a lot, because it is a map that you don't get to visit very often, and I like to have those 1v1 confrontations, so I am happy about this. Finally, we can also assure you that any new monsters added in Title Update 3 will also feature the 9-star difficulty quests. Very happy about this. I hope that this also is going to work for every monster moving forward, but maybe they are saving something special for Title Update 4, so we're gonna have to wait for that. Now, weapon balance changes. Oh boy, here we go. This is where, surprisingly, 11 out of the 14 weapons are going to be changed. It's very rare to see this many weapons being changed in a non-title update, so I am excited to see what they are gonna do. They do have an opening statement mentioning that in the previous update we aimed for greater diversity in hunting styles and equipment builds, including equipment with elemental properties. We performed balanced adjustments, including some downward adjustments to ensure that no single strategy was overly effective against monsters introduced later on. However, this resulted in some hunting styles becoming less viable and certain weapon types experiencing lower than intended viability. We apologize for the results and that we did not communicate our balancing intentions clearly enough. So some of these changes are going to be a compensation buff because they overcorrected with Title Update 2 whenever it came to nerfing certain weapons. I fear one of them is going to be the Sword and Shield and the Gun Lance. Speaking of which, revisiting downward adjustments, so the reverting of some nerfs. For Sword and Shield, Charge Blade, Light Bowgun, and Heavy Bowgun, we will be revisiting the downward adjustments made in Title Update 2. Sword and Shield. In Wilds, we have particularly focused on making the weapon easy to handle for even beginners, making adjustments to its moveset so that a certain level of damage can be dealt with any action. Among these, the damage output of some actions was found to be too high in relation to their ease of use when compared to other weapon types. Therefore, we made some downward adjustments in Title Update 2. If I'm not mistaken, one of those nerfs was to the charge chop, and they also made it so you can no longer spam counter slash, and they nerfed the damage of counter slash. And among those adjustments, we found that the downward adjustment to guard slash reduced the usage frequency of counter slash, so we're applying a slight power increase to guard slash to compensate. I mean, that is exactly what you would expect to happen. They removed the ability to pretty much spam guard slash to go into a counter slash, which I think a lot of us saw coming, but they also greatly reduced the damage that you would deal with the counter slash. So you were just no longer incentivized to go for that, so a lot of times you would just go and do the sliding attack that has a ton of iframes to dodge out of the way of attacks. But it's nice to see that they are trying to get people to use that more often. Now, as for the Charge Blade in Title Update 2, we aim to balance the amped elemental discharge so that it could offer another reliable source of damage beyond the multi-hit attacks in Axe mode. However, the adjustment resulted in less power than intended and also failed to expand player options. To address this, we revisited those adjustments and made it so that the increased damage via the enhanced files is reflected while in Power Axe mode, making it easier to maintain high damage output while keeping Power Axe mode active. That one is quite interesting because the Charge Blade did get a good buff in the form of your guard points now working as a perfect guard so you can more easily go into Power Axe mode, but the nerfs they added to the weapon really made it feel a lot worse compared to before, because if you were a good Charge Blade user, you already know that the guard points do not count as a perfect guard, so you can't use them for certain things, so you were already used to that, so it didn't really change your playstyle, you just kind of felt like your weapon dealt less damage. So that is a very nice buff. Let's see how much damage it actually allows you to deal. And then we have the Light Bowgun and Heavy Bowgun. So the nerfs they made to Elemental and Pierce ammo was to prevent these weapons from being overpowered in the future against the more powerful monsters, and to also encourage you to use more ammo types, but it really just ended up making the weapons feel bad. So with this this, it seems like they're going back on the nerf for elemental ammo, for the light bowgun specifically, and they may also be touching up the amount of rapid fire and ignition gauge recovery that you get whenever you use pierce ammo, and also increasing the amount of gauge that you get with the different ammo types. So it just seems like a bunch of buffs across the different ammo types and just makes the weapon more satisfying to use by giving you more gauge, so it becomes a lot less of a one-note weapon, which is my biggest problem with the bowguns. So I would say a very nice and insightful change. Now this is what I'm the most excited for. As for other weapons, we will perform some upward adjustments for weapons like the greatsword and insect glaive as well, which previously have not been the subject of balance changes. For dual blades, and this one is a very big one, we focused on improving usability such as making demon boost mode easier to maintain and making focus strikes easier to use. In particular, based on player feedback, we added a focus strike action which can be chained into other actions that provides another option for continuing attacks without changing your position. So here you can see that in action. The hunter goes for the focus strike and is able to perform that different focus strike that allows you to stay on the monster, not go along the monster, and maybe this time around the focus strike will not be a big DPS loss for the dual blades, because that was the biggest problem. You had this really cool move that you want to do more often because it is very satisfying, but it just doesn't deal enough damage. So it's very cool to see that we now have this extra option. We have also implemented upwards adjustments for each weapon type, focusing on expanding playstyle options. We encourage hunters to try each of the weapons out again after the update is live, so let's go on to talk about all of those weapon adjustments. And so we come to the weapon adjustments. Now they do have a couple of changes here, but not much that actually matters, unless you are hunting Lagiacrus underwater, and the fact that they have nerfed the damage scaling of other players while you are mounting a monster so that they don't deal a lot of damage while the monster is busy with you mounting it. And so let's begin with the greatsword. They have made it easier to chain into tackle from combos such as the strong wide slash to true charge slash, tackle to TCS, and side blow to strong charge slash. They've also made it so that the leaping wide slash now chains faster into the side blow, strong wide slash now chains faster into TCS, and the raw damage for charge slash, jumping charge slash, strong charge slash, TCS, and strong wide slash has been slightly increased, and the elemental scaling for all of these except for the jumping charge slash has also been increased. I'm a bit confused why they are allowing you to charge the greatsword a little bit quicker, albeit it's the charge after the wide slashes that is being buffed, which these wide slashes are used a lot less often, so maybe people are going to start doing them now to have access to the faster charge times, and making it easier to chain into tackle at pretty much any point you are playing with a weapon is going to be a very sizable buff. So having that on top of being able to charge the greatsword faster, potentially this might actually not be that good. Again, I don't think a lot of players are using the wide slashes, but then also having more raw damage and more elemental scaling, it's just an overall very big buff for the greatsword, so we're going to have to wait for the numbers on this one, but it sounds amazing on paper. As for the longsword, they have reduced the delay between the input and action when chaining into the Ice Spirit Slash from Special Sheath. This is something that a lot of longsword players, Peppo of course being at the helm, have complained about, as input delay just makes the weapon feel a lot more inconsistent, and that is never good. But on top of that, they have also given it a buff, slightly extending the window to perform the EI Spirit Slash. Just a very nice thing in my opinion. It's likely not going to have a change for the more dedicated players, but for people that don't have as much of a handle on the timing for these things and may need to wait a little bit longer as they went into the stance too soon because they're not used to the weapon, this might be a good buff for those players. As for the counter slash, as we talked about before, its damage is being buffed, though it is only going to be the raw damage. But then we get to the dual blades, and this is where things actually get quite interesting. Again, we have that new focus strike, so right here we can see that new focus strike in action once again. Pretty cool that we're now going to be able to actually stay in place while we do these focus strikes, and it also is quite short, the animation that is, so we're going to be able to then spend more time doing damage. But also very importantly, this new focus strike can be chained into Turning Tide Drill, a new finisher action that delivers a multi-hit attack to a targeted wound by pressing triangle. So the way you use it is you go into the focus strike, and as you are doing the action of the hunter leaping backwards like that, you start spamming the triangle button or left click, and you are going to perform the new focus strike. This one right here. So pretty simple and effective, but on top of that they have increased the effect duration triggered by perfect effect while in demon boost mode. That in combination with the buff that they have made it so that the window for a successful perfect evade has been extended, albeit very slightly, so it's probably just like 1, maybe 2 additional iframes on an already very forgiving dodge, is going to allow you to pretty much always have the buff that you get in demon boost mode always active, which is fantastic. A huge damage buff. They've also increased the movement speed during demon mode. Not much to say about it, it's just nice because sometimes you don't want to deplete your stamina to get close to a monster and you don't have enough range to simply use your circle attack to get near a monster. So you are in this bit of an awkward scenario, but maybe now we don't have to sheath the weapon in those scenarios. They've also improved the responsiveness of the directional changes when using the screw slicer in focus mode. So again, overall just making the weapon feel more consistent, as sometimes the attack would miss when it should have been aimed at the monster and it should have connected. Very good buffs in my opinion, and I'm excited to try them out. Then we have the hunting horn. They have added armor to the hit stab, preventing the user from being knocked back by a monster attack. So the hilt stab is that very small attack that you do just to get one additional note in very quickly. So maybe there's going to be some tech now where you perform a hit with the hunting horn, but you see you're going to be attacked by a monster and you just quickly go into the hilt stab and prevent being knocked back. That could be pretty cool. They also now allow you to chain into the hilt stab after performing a focus strike, reverb, echo bubble, special performance, encore, or even evading. Oh man, okay. So being able to perform the hilt stab after evading is not only going to allow you to get more notes for the melodies even faster, because you can start the combo from the hilt stab, but again, you can simply dodge an attack and see that you are going to be hit, so you go into the hilt stab. That is very interesting. Very excited to see how this works. And as for the echo bubble, it can now be chained into from an offset melody, resounding melody, or encore, so they're just making the weapon feel a lot more fluid and allow you to combo from one thing to the next. You never really have to stop your action, wait for the hunter to kind of reset to the neutral position, and only then perform the things. So a very nice buff in my opinion. And they have finally fixed an issue that caused the finisher focus strike reverb to be difficult to connect. So very good buffs in my opinion. So here we have an actual video of the hunting horn changes in effect. I hope that for future updates they actually leave a link to these Twitter posts in the official patch notes, because these are actually very helpful. But then on the other hand, the Twitter posts do not list every change that the patch note lists. But anyways, here you can see the big changes with the hilt thrust in action. Right there, so the hunter pretty much chains from the encore into that attack as usual, but then he goes into the hilt stab and is able to power through the monster attack, in this case the Dreaming Dummies attack. So yeah, it's pretty much hyper armor on the hilt stab that again, you're going to be able to use this after almost anything you do, including a dodge roll. This is a huge buff for the hunting horn. Very happy about this. And then we move on to the huge shopping list of changes that the lance is getting. Boy oh boy, look at all those changes. So damage taken while in power guard has been further reduced. Quite good. It's weird that you were still taking damage in power guard sometimes. It just felt like it wasn't worth it to go into power guard a lot of the times, so that is a nice buff. Raw damage and elemental scaling for retribution thrust following a perfect guard has been increased, so you can have more of that counter playstyle. And the raw damage and elemental scaling for the wide sweep, reverse attack, finishing thrust, finishing twin thrust, and counter rush has been increased. That is pretty much everything with the exception of the thrusts, but also, as we're going to see, the elemental scaling for return thrust, mid thrust 1, 2 and 3 and triple thrust have all been increased, and the raw damage of high thrust and payback thrust and guard retribution thrust has also been increased, and they have made the hitbox of retribution thrust larger. So just a lot of damage buff for the lance. That is amazing to see. I also like this quality of life change because this is something that tripped me up as a more casual lance player. The charge counter can now be chained into a perfect guard or guard with minimal knockback. This is something I kind of expected you to be able to do, and I would often try to do it, but it just wouldn't work. So this is a very nice quality of life change, at least for me personally. They have extended the distance traveled when inputting a direction with the leaping thrust, return thrust, and payback thrust. Maybe we can play Evade Lance now? This might be a very good buff for Evade Lance, because you don't get iframes with these, but you do get a lot more of that back and forth that you get with the dodging lance playstyle, and having more distance between these can often allow you to dodge an attack and then get back into the monster. They have adjusted the transition from wide sweeping to mid thrust, high thrust, and dash attack to be quicker, so an overall just DPS increase. The amount of weapon sharpness consumed when performing the focus strike was reduced. This is something that a lot of people that don't play Lance just do not believe, but the weapon that consumes the most sharpness is not the dual blades, it's the lance. Maybe the gun lance is a close second, but the lance is by far the weapon that consumes the most sharpness. So being able to reduce the amount of sharpness that you consume with a focus strike is a nice buff. After winning a power clash, you can now follow up with return thrust, payback thrust, or retribution thrust. Just having more options after a power clash is always nice. And again, given that all of these have been greatly buffed, or at least been mentioned multiple times as being buffed, it's just nice to have it as a follow-up to a power clash. And then they have bug fixed a couple of things, but this list of buffs is pretty amazing for the lance. I felt like a weapon was in a decent spot, but it just didn't feel very appealing. Maybe because the attacks didn't feel as fluid as they did to me back in Iceborne and Sunbreak, where I was a huge lance player back then. So maybe this will actually get me to play the lance a lot more often. Now, as for the gun lance, they only have a single sentence. They have fixed an issue where, under certain conditions, performing burst fire while the skill load shells 2 was active would result in fewer hits than intended. So, a nice bug fix. As for the switch axe, they have pretty much made the offset attack that you perform in axe mode easier to trigger. You can think of it as having more active frames where you're able to trigger this offset attack whenever the monster is attacking you. And in addition to that, they have also increased the damage of the offset attack. So if you were good at landing these offset attacks, you're going to be dealing more damage, and if you weren't, you now have a bigger window to actually use them. So a very nice buff indeed. So as we talked about before, with the charge blade, they're going to be increasing the damage of what had been nerfed in the past. So a raw damage increase for the elemental discharge 1 and 2, and a raw damage increase for the attacks you perform while in power axe mode. It also seems like they are now trying to make it so that you use enhanced files while in power axe mode. They're trying to make it a little bit better, it feels, as the explosion damage will now properly reflect the damage of the enhanced files effect. So if I understand it correctly, if you had enhanced files during power axe mode before the update, you simply didn't get the damage buff from having enhanced files if you did the elemental discharge in power axe mode. So that just feels like a bug fix, but if it was intended, that sounds dumb. But either way, it's a buff regardless, and it's nice to see. And then we have the insect glaive that also gets a shopping list of changes, and some of these are quite interesting. And we also have this video here accompanying it, which I'll talk about whenever it becomes relevant. First off, they have made the offset attacks easier to trigger. In case you weren't aware, the insect glaive has 2 offset attacks, one you can perform on the ground that lifts you up into the air, and one that you can perform in the air where you go down into the ground. Me personally, I always find it easier to land the one in the air because you can just let go of the button whenever a monster is gonna hit you and you perform the offset attack, whereas the one on the ground has a pretty big lead up to the attack. It has a big animation commitment at the beginning, so it's very hard to get that to actually trigger on a monster attack. So being able to more consistently be able to trigger these is going to feel very good. They have also improved the amount of iframes you get whenever you vault backwards, and they have increased the distance whenever you vault backwards when you are using the skill evade extender. I find it a bit weird that it's only evading backwards and not into any direction, but we can see it here in action where the hunter is attacking the training dummy, he's getting hit, he dodges backwards, and is able to dodge the incoming attack, whereas before he was not able to do so. So maybe now after the update, we are going to be using the vault as a way to dodge attacks, as in actually use the vault for its iframes rather than simply going for a dodge roll or vaulting to a completely different place from the monster to completely dodge the attack. I find it interesting that we're getting iframes on these, or at least more iframes to feel consistent, so I will be playing around with this. It may feel a lot better. In case you weren't aware, the insect glaive was the weapon I planned on maining until the sword and shield, but I still put in hundreds of hunts with the the insect glaive. I love this weapon. So whenever I see damage buffs, I get very excited about this. The raw damage of strong reaping slash and dodge slash has been increased. The raw damage and elemental scaling of strong double slash and tornado slash have been increased. I always felt like tornado slash is not something that you do a lot often in wild, because more often than not you're just going to the charged attack. So it's nice to see that it's being buffed. They have fixed an issue that caused the mid-air combo to have a lower than intended attack power. This can actually have a big effect on your damage output if you are more of an aerial insect glaive player. You may notice you doing a lot more damage now in the air. Oh, I am so happy about this. Improve the hit detection of focused thrust leaping strike while moving away from the target in the air. So first off, very nice. I always felt like it was very inconsistent to land a focus strike, especially if you were in the air, because a lot of times you would go into the charged attack that leaves you in the air, and as you are going down, you want to try to land a cheeky focus strike so you can get all of the extracts and go back into the charged attack. But a lot of times if you were in the air, unless the monster was pretty much on top of you, it would be very hard to land the focus strike. So now we're going to be a lot more consistent. And on top of that, this attack will now also retrieve extracts upon a successful hit, as it does when performed on the ground. Am I crazy? Didn't this already give you extracts? I'm pretty sure that it did. Or is this not the focus strike? Yeah, I just looked back at some gameplay and it absolutely gives you extracts. So I'm not really sure about this. Very confused about this. If you guys have any idea what this second sentence means, please let me know. I'm very confused. Then the rest of these are bug fixes, like Rathalos not giving you the intended extract whenever you use your Kinsect, and a few other bugs, though I don't see anything about mentioning the Kinsect going to Narnia whenever you aim it. Either way, I'm excited to try these out. More damage overall on your combos, and more iframes when vaulting backwards seem pretty nice. None of these sound crazy, but the one that might excite me the most is the hit detection on the focus strike. And then we get to the ranged weapons, starting with the light bowgun. I'm not gonna go through all of these because I'm not much of a bowgun player, but as I talked about before, all of these ammo types are getting buffs in either damage or just being able to give you more gauge, or reducing the amount of gauge that you consume whenever you use the rapid fire mode. So it's going to make the weapon feel a lot nicer and a lot more engaging, which I love to see. Then we have the heavy bowgun. Once again, as we talked about before, a lot of focus on giving you more ignition gauge, though I don't really see any kind of damage changes apart from the Wyvern Blast ignition and Wyvern counter, and personally that's what I like to see, so we get to use more of the unique stuff of the weapon and not just spam the same ammo over and over. And as for the bow, a single line is all you get, and it's a bug fix where the arc shot would sometimes disappear if the attack hit the top of the area. But then we get to the part that I'm very excited for, especially the very first buff. So these are the skills that are going to be changed with the new update, and the first one is, it just makes me so happy. They have adjusted the effects of the set bonus skill Bubbly Dance as follows. So before the update, Bubbly Dance 1 would prevent major bubble blight and increase your evasion while you have bubble blight, but it would not give you bubble blight. And that was the biggest problem with the set. I even made a video specifically about Bubbly Dance and how good it actually is, but the problem with it is that you need to use all 4 pieces to get bubble blight affected on you. Well, after the changes, Bubbly Dance 1 will allow you to get minor bubble blight after dodging several times, which is what you would get on Bubbly Dance 2. So now all you need is 2 Mizutsune armor pieces, and a couple of them are actually very good, to trigger the bubble blight effect. And in case you don't remember, with the Mizutsune weapon Skill Slicked Blade, which may potentially now be found in a charm, you get 21% additional affinity whenever you are afflicted with bubble blight. So you can have 2 armor pieces just give you 21% affinity like that. And these weapons are quite good. 210 raw, 15% affinity with a lot of wide sharpness and these decoration slots, that's quite good. But then with Bubbly Dance 2, in addition to all of this, you also get more iframes while you are affected by bubble blight, which you would already get, but this boost in iframes is being increased now. So I don't know how many iframes you would get with Bubbly Dance. It's very hard to test these things. If anyone finds a data mine for Bubbly Dance, please let me know so I can know the numbers. But I'm going to be combining this with the iframe boost that we are getting with the dual blades, and it's gonna go crazy. I'm telling you, you guys gotta stay tuned for those videos. I'm gonna cook here. I was already already cooking 4 months ago. I'm very excited about this. In addition to that, the set bonus War Cry, which can be found on the Blagonga set, has had its duration adjusted. So now all of the effects that you get from War Cry, which was 3 raw attack at level 1 or 6 raw attack at level 2, depending on if you were using the 2-piece or the 4-piece set bonus, and these will now stack with the effects of other armors that you have equipped, which was not the case before. So you could potentially now play as a support character where you go in with the War Cry skill, you use the emote that activates War Cry, you give everyone in your party plus 3 or plus 6 raw attack, and that effect is going to stack with everything those hunters also have. So that can be quite good. Adjusted the set bonus skill Powerhouse so that it stacks now with all other effects, and Powerhouse is the set bonus that gives you plus 10 attack after a power clash or an offset attack, and can be found on the Doshiguma sets, both the Guardian and the regular Doshiguma. So much like with Warcry, just being able to use this and combine it with other attack increasing effects like Gormagalas, for example, somehow would be quite nice. They have also increased the effect of the skill Burst Boost, which is the Ebony Odogaron set bonus that gives you just more damage when you have boost. So maybe it's actually worth it to go for burst boost. The Ebony Odogaron pieces aren't awful, but they aren't also very competitive. But if the damage is good enough, maybe it's actually worth it to go for it. They have also increased the duration of the set bonus Affinity Sliding, and it currently gives you 30% affinity for 30 seconds, which is a lot of affinity for a long amount of time, but triggering it can be quite difficult, as you need to find a ledge, and if you are sliding, you're also not dealing damage. So if this increases to, let's say, 60 seconds, that is a huge boost if you can somehow get this to proc. And I'm talking this much about Affinity Sliding exclusively because the Lagiacrus set is able to give you Affinity Sliding. So if you play with the 4-piece Lagiacrus build that I made here in this video, you may potentially get that 30% affinity for a long time. So that can potentially be decent. Now, Shock Absorber, the skill that prevents people from actually lynching you, they have now made it so that if you are using a shield and you block an attack, you will not have a knockback effect on the shield. It just didn't make any sense that Shock Absorber would block everything, but if you put down a shield, you then get stun locked by a friend. And they have adjusted the ballistic skill to increase the effective range for normal, pierce, and spread ammo. And additionally, normal and spread ammo will now be within effective range even at point blank distance, if you have the skill at level 2 or higher, which I think there's only 2 levels of ballistic right now, but they are doing this so that if we get an expansion and ballistics 3, it will also work this way. So this is actually a pretty big buff, I think, for especially newer players to the Bogans that don't know the effective ranges too well, and they might be getting too close to the monsters where they deal less damage. But if you are an already experienced Bogan user, this likely is not going to change very much for you, because you are already used to these ranges. You also get a couple of changes to support hunters and the Sacred, making the Sacred easier to control. And lastly, there is something that a lot of people have been asking for, the improvements to the game's stability. Now, I'm not going to be reading all of this, but essentially they are pushing out an optimization patch that is going to be coming with the update. Supposedly it will help the game's overall performance, but it's not going to be a huge change. That is going to be coming, if I understand this correctly, with Title Update 3, so at the end of September, and they likely will be doing some bigger changes based on what they find with this smaller update that they are releasing. It just sucks that a lot of people aren't able to play this amazing game because of such a stupid problem as being the performance and the poor optimization of wilds. You know, it's something that I hope improves because more people should be able to play the game. So we might be waiting a little longer up until all of the performance issues are fixed, but at least they are addressing it, they are pushing out patches and whatever they can fix for the time being, it seems, but we're still waiting for some big improvements. That being said, let me know what you guys are most excited for this update that almost feels like a title update with how many changes we're getting. I'm very excited about this. Of course, we're going to be getting these charms to grind for, new builds to make, a lot of adjustments, a new difficulty, so it's gonna be awesome. I'm going to be making a lot more videos on this. I'm going to be testing every single weapon change, so if you guys are excited for that, please stay tuned to the channel. With that being said, my name is Dark Hero, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, happy hunting!